Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my co-host and daughter,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
This show is brought to you in partnership with the Compassionate Friends and the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation. And today, Heidi, we're going to talk to somebody who we've had on our TV show, Janet Burroway, and I'm excited about having her on because we're going to talk about writing your way through grief. And this is a woman who can tell you about writing. Well, Heidi, why don't you talk about what she's done?
She is an incredible writer and has won awards. Her name is Janet Burroway, and as you said, she was on our cable show as well. She is the author of plays, poetry, children's books, and 8 novels, including The Buzzards, Raw Silk, Opening Nights, and The Bridge of Sand. Her writing fiction, 9th edition, is the most widely used creative writing text in America. Her book, Finding Tim, is based on the death of her son, Tim. She is Robert O. Lawton Distinguished Professor Emerita at Florida State University and winner of the 2014 Florida Lifetime Achievement in Writing Award. Welcome to the show, Janet.
My pleasure. Nice to be on.
It's so great to have you on. And I'm going to kind of give a little backstory, Janet, and you can chime in because I do want to get to the writing part, people writing their way through grief and what it's done for you. But a little backstory is, if I'm right, your son, Tim, he had served in the military and he had served in Iraq, but he was doing landmines for the civilian corps, right?
Yes. He had learned mine removal in the Army, but then they privatized the job that he had in the Army. So by the time he went to Iraq, he was working for a contractor rather than directly for the Army.
And he was living there with his wife and one child, is that right, as I remember?
He had a stepson and also a small daughter.
Right. And he had always used a lot of guns, and he ended up dying by shooting himself. You were mainly a fiction writer, and I wonder, because I know there are people that are listening who are compelled to write, even though they hadn't been writers. And you had been a writer. What was different for you? Did you hesitate? Did you think about, do I really want to write about this tough topic?
No. I never for a moment questioned it. I think it's different. If writing is the way that you always try to make sense of life's chaos, then it's pretty well automatic to go to it. But I think that a lot of people who don't spend their lives writing also feel that I have to contain what I'm feeling in some way, and it helps to put it down. But also for the next couple of months, I just flashed everything I was feeling down on the computer, thing that I was feeling. And I went to it 2 or 3 times a day, I think, just not attempting to write. I wasn't trying to make beautiful prose. I was just trying to contain the feelings that I was having.
One thing I found with writing is that if you write it down, you don't have to keep trying to remember it. You know what I mean? It's there if you want to go back to it.
Absolutely. And in fact, as I was doing this journaling of what I was feeling every day, it occurred to me at some point that what I'm putting into my journal is not really the pattern of my daily thoughts, that really I'm writing about grief, but half the time I'm remembering Tim. I'm remembering. In the early days after his death, those memories were full of grief as well. Later on, the memories became precious again,
Mm-hmm.
But in those early days, I realized that I was only recording what I was feeling and not what I was remembering. So then I started remembering. I started writing my memories of him as well. And then it became a powerful motivation for me that I wanted to catch everything I remembered. I didn't want to let go of it. When I realized that there was a book in what I was writing down and that it might be a book that could be helpful to other people, then I began looking at how I could use some of this material. So the book ended up as being roughly 2 chronologies. What I'm going through day after day as the mother of a child who committed suicide, and what I'm remembering from his babyhood and then his toddlerhood and his childhood and his growing into a young man. So there are roughly 2 chronologies.
My mom and I were talking before the show about how the book begins with every suicide is a suicide bomber. And why did you begin the book in this way?
It's a shocking beginning. I was going to begin the book by talking about the phone call I got with this terrible news, which was so shocking that there's almost no way to convey it in words. And so when that phrase occurred to me, every suicide is a suicide bomber, I thought that's shocking in the way that I was shocked when I got that phone call. So that's a good way to begin, by shocking the reader. What I mean by it is that I think that my son was deeply depressed, disillusioned with the war in Iraq, and himself grieving and trapped in his own thoughts. I don't think that he meant to hurt anybody by taking his own life, but he hurt us all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's no way that you can commit suicide without the shrapnel flying in every direction to your friends and your family, and keep flying. The wound lasts for a long time.
I like that metaphor, Janet. Just the fact that when someone takes their life, the shrapnel flies and it just spreads all over. I mean, it hurts so many. And like you said, when people die by suicide, they just want to be out of their pain. And sometimes they think that they're a burden to others and don't realize the ramifications after they're gone, that it'll be so much more painful with them gone
Right.
than it would have been if they had stayed. I'm just wondering, Tim died by suicide, and suicide is such an issue right now with the military. And do you think that what happened with him, being disenfranchised, et cetera, is what's happening with so many others out there that are taking their lives in the military?
Absolutely. The foreword to my book was written by Jonathan Shea, who's a psychiatrist in Boston who has dealt for 20 years with survivors of the Vietnam War. And what he talks about is a phrase that I had never heard before. He talks about moral injury. And I think that he finds this among soldiers who feel that they had volunteered for a situation in which they are now caught. They're now trapped. And if the higher-ups make bad decisions, they are trapped doing something that they know to be wrong. Mm-hmm. And he thinks that moral injury in that situation is as great a trauma as the actual violence of the war. And I feel that's what happened to my son. He believed so strongly in the war. He thought they would find the WMDs. He thought Bush was handling it beautifully. And when he got there, he was so horribly disillusioned. He told his wife that at one time he was going with a security convoy from the Army to a demining site, and that American soldiers shot into a house. And he was moral to the point of prudish, my son, and he was so shocked that could happen, even though all of us have read about it in Vietnam and so forth. Mm-hmm. But this was before Abu Ghraib. I think there was no suggestion to him that soldiers were misbehaving.
I didn't realize that there are more than 330,000 men and women working in every profession imaginable, are not on active duty with the military, but serve as an integral part of the Army team to support the defense of our nation. I mean, that's incredible that there's so many people.
It happened very rapidly. After the drawdown, after the Vietnam War in the military force was much smaller, and then they began to build it up again, and they did so by hiring contractors. So that by the time of the Iraq War, over half of the jobs that had always been done by the military were being done by contractors, from potato peeling to mine removal to food supply to security. All of these jobs had been farmed out to private firms.
And they don't have the support that the military does.
Absolutely not. This is one of the things that I wanted to point out in the book, that the American public has conflated, and I blame journalism for this, has conflated the idea of the rapacious contractor after an American government contract that will make them a lot of money, and the employees, some of whom get very little. My son was very well paid, but he was also there because he was a patriot,
right,
not because he was a contractor, And I think that there has been a lot of, at least, lip service to the honor of our brave young men and women in the armed forces. But contractors get none of that, and many of them are veterans. Most of them are veterans.
So I wanted to ask you, getting back to your writing of the book, was there any aha moment for you in this book where you came to a better understanding of why you think Tim took his life?
That's a very interesting question. Heidi, I noticed that in your introduction, you misspoke and you called the book finding Tim instead of losing Tim,
Oh,
which
losing
I
Tim.
love. Well, I love that because that turned out to be the purpose of the book. You know, as I was putting it together, how can I find my son and understand what it was that he did? And I think the answer is that you have to come to some understanding that's satisfying to you. You never will come to a full understanding. I traced all of the clues that came after his death, things that he said to various of his friends and to his wife and to his stepson, and tried to think myself into the situation he was in when he came home to Namibia in southern Africa, where there was very little support for the war. And at one point he said, I'm tired of being the bad man. And that's heartbreaking to me, that he came to feel that about himself when he had been so devoted to the warrior spirit and to his patriotism and so forth. At any rate, you asked about aha moments, and I think there was not an aha moment. There were several moments when people said things to me that were hugely helpful, and I've tried to include all of those in the book. And there were moments when I was told something that Tim had said or done that I thought, that's a little piece of the explanation. But I can't say that there was a moment that I said, now I understand. You know, you never totally understand.
Well, Janet, I wanted to ask you to talk. I know people that are listening to this are like, wow, you know, I would like to write a book, or I've been working on it, or I've got all my notes together, but I don't know how to go about it. And I know you're speaking at the Writers' Conference in LA, probably this spring, and people can go online and look at it. And do you want to talk a little bit about the conference for people who are interested in figuring out how to put it all together?
Yeah, it's actually in the spring of 2016 in LA, and I ought to be able to tell you the date, but I cannot. You can look it up. It's Associated Writing Programs, AWP, and you can look it up online this way. It's AWP Writer, so AWPWRITER.org. And there are dozens and dozens of panels about how to do this and how to do that and how to begin and how to go on, you know. And there will probably be panels, I may be on one, about the writing of elegy. And it's an enormously supportive and wonderful place to be. It's kind of daunting that there are that many writers in America. People could go to my website, which is just www.janetburroway.com, and it will give you the information about writing fiction and the other textbook, imaginative writing. But to buy Losing Tim, it's all the usual suspects, you know, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. Just look up either my name or the title Losing Tim, and it'll pop up. The publisher is Think Piece in Minneapolis.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Janet, and it's delightful to talk to you, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Gloria.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you so much for all your writing, and thank you for helping people find hope after loss through your writing.
We want to thank you all for listening today, and we want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours till you find your own, and God bless.